The answer path, profound and wonderful Dharma, is difficult to encounter in billions of eons. I now see it, hear it, receive it, and uphold it. I vow to fathom the Tathagata's true meaning in order to liberate all beings. Let's generate the supreme bodhicitta. Let us begin our class on the Sutra on generating the supreme aspiration of Bodhisattva. We will have one class today and another class later this week.
Shirip Marmba Kirva, Yono, Shamba, Zhanyang, Chut Mubar Shago, Shanchu Sanhua Kantagla, Jura Mechang, Santan Me Larponga Mechang, Domba Me Patan, Mount Tuba Yonson Sura Me Pate, and the Division Shabif Tambala, Raptor Shunga Mayano, Shamba Division Shabif Tambano, Santan Darpon Shiva, Yishiji, Dipshiba, Yishiji, Number of Joba, Zumbi Shiva, Yin Kimbi le dang jartab shi palab shiwa na mayan de dartar jartab shi pe le te na mirg balab jura dang dapshilam ngumbar gawar nam dang jiktin jib shiawe ragbar te shanchib senhui te lan dopab ki pram mafsha wo shamba kartib shanchib senhui jartab shi palab zumbi rimbo chirnab dan jim churten takkar tongsum jir tong chimbo jiktin ji kam dadak gang na te ne ngam nibr shiba mayan no rumur shiba mayan no mayan kurtib shiba mayan ge shamba kartib shanchib senhwa tana parur de shimba dan bi tsig jibi tsig jaba chig zam zan tam chang am lokam kun de chibr shetam chang na ti ne ngap kurtib shi lamr shi rumur shi Chopper Shibran Yoro, the Jibsirjin of Shamba, Devian Shabanam, Shanchim, the Manda Tubali, Shunga Yinja, Umubo Yonson Zambali, Shunga Mayimbi, Shiro, Shamba Kartif Shanchu Sanwa Jarda Shibala, Zumbi Shanchu Sanwa, Long no Patan, Kadu Shibala, Zumbi Jarda Shiba, Ship of Rugby Rubber Shibana, Sunum Dopatena, Sunum Mayimbi Pombo Chimbur Keeper and Girti, Ligi Jiba Yonson Zambran Yoro, the Jibsirjin of Sunum Shevi, Joson Bokan and Batena, Tamchet. Shirble Shiro, Shamba, Tavina, Shanchu Sanwa, Jartab Shipa, Zumba Ve, Zumbi, Shanchu Sanwa, Luno Padan, Kadun de Shipa, Zumbi, Varchat, Luno Pa, Luno Pa, Kadun Shipa. Shushin Yansu Kadun Shipala Zumbi Versit Mafshao Tuson Shushin Yansu Kadun Shipala Zumbi Versit Mafshao, Zamilan Gajartab Shipabe, Yonsakan or Gerva Jartab Shipate, Tamchikina, Shanchib Sanhua, Luno Patan, Kadu Shipala Zumbach Chigla, Rumdru, Nimkrip Shago, Shanchib Sanhua, Luno Patan, Kadun Shipala Zumban Zawan, Gun Jirni Shanchib Sanhua, Nanda Yantak Branjoba, Zumbach Chigla, Rumdru, Nimkrip Shago, Testavina, Dejan Shabar, Jis, Yeran, Nawa Yente. Tetak Kuf Nimkerna, Tetak of Nimkerna, Labrashiba Yano, Ganji, Shirabla Shopala Muni, Ramjodan Nimkershipi, Sonumji Pombona, Sanme Pertiver in Euro, the Egyptian Terter Shiripki Lena, Kavi le dang, lana me pa dang, gongna me pa dang, jikting sambo tam chile kyabar dang phagba, ngumbram phagbi shiro, shenpa ter tabi na shanchib sangwa ngumbr tsumba, tonda nirjang, tsundi, tsumbrang dobe shirib la, tsumbra shiajang, shirib yongsib zarwa la, tsundi tsambra shiago, teni, Jumdan de la shanchib sangwa chenpo shenpe ndirkit chik sordo, Jumdan de shanchib sangwa ndanzilak gawa dang, lelak gawa namgi, nongmigir nam nab kaaf zarwar lagna, Jumdan de jib shanchib sangwa chubalak gawa, nongmigir nam chirtarib taqbarib gyo, shanchib sangwa gang taqba na, nyevar gane jang tsupa mam chibar nebar ngir lag, Jumdan de jib kaaf zarwar, shenpa shanchib sangwa Chubala gabe nyegmir nambam durudana nishibo taqbar shaagwar. Gepir na tebzhang shaqbam tayibab tande tar tikbar yang mangyo ro. Nishi gangzi na shambib shanchib sanhwa chubala gabe tse ndanya lar dingmir tang yidme dewa mangwaran gerwa tang. Aneba tang. Zopale yongsa nyambaran gerwa tang. Ti mamzawar nam yirangwaran gerwa tang. Telab dutki Gurvaran jirwa tang, te lab dutkin kurjang gawaran jirwa tang, ti gewe churna martiye bar kewaran man jirwa tang, keba na meparan jirwa tang, taba tang kundan zimba na, soba tang yeba mangwaran jirwa tang, taba tang soba tang yebe ngansung dan zhoran jirwa, le mgombaran dapshiparan jirwa tang, wag meparan jirwa le lamda zimba tang, ti shi wangbo tsiparan jirwa tang, ti lom nuba churnam lagbarag neparan man jirwa tang, lom nuba吃着，mdorde long mamnu barnam lamda chakbar manjirwa tang, gewi shingyan tamchiti yongsor pungwaran jirwa tang, dugbu chokbor namdam nirdam chaparan jirwa tang, kawa lamji ngibir mjongwa tang, jinman chapa yong yut mugungwi tsignam tubaran jirwa tang, kanda kiba te tang ter tetsum jandan jirwa tang, tela mukum jet po tag nyewaran jirwa tang, tagda ti xkar shuglap tsumbe warchit njongwaran jirwa te nishi ponde tag na chubala gawa nyegmi rnam ndur diba yante yangtag yongsor tetag yongsor pangro shawo teni tsiksib jabi teni chomdan diki tsiksib jabanda tag kwarsar to tena tendarab devar mangyar te vzotang rangjang chowi shugla ne te yik jarnam gajang teni jarnam gawaran jirwa te Shuvchu teyi nipan datak ko udatjang tela gajam gavaran jir udakib shukjang tela gavaran jir teyi gewi chu tie chidzaran jir shuvchu teyi nipan datak ko tena namjang gavaran mafje jang chakar tatada jile neba tang ngansung jovi lena sheparan jir shuvchu teyi nipan datak ko mamzi pa dang tana mardig dang tenar tagda rigri mambaran jir teyi sheyi wangbo tsum jir te chushu teyi niban datak ko lomnu churnam lagbar magne jang lomnu mafshim dorde tuman jir gewi shenir namjang nambar pong chushu teyi niban datak ko rdugba chobo tagdang chaparan jir kawi tagbay nambar tagan jir jang mandut bayi tsignamar gyendo tu chushu teyi niban datak ko shibi lojan tedag karche jang yin nam mayin nyamda tertog jang tagda tena tetsum nyenjer bab chushu teyi niban datak ko tena makum yatang rangma njer tena tarwar dambim chogma njer telag nupan datak tagm jong te chushu teyi niban datak ko teyi gewa tagla warchit mang kagsi njerwe mnirdo tubma njer tsundang danyang telag jarnam jong chushu teyi niban datak ko kebe niban datak rigni na chuba tamchida yongsor pangwara chushu tagna nopar nyepar la testa vena chuba nema chula nema gangla chuba gam tsupa nema下面我们讲这部经典啊。
Let's continue with our class today.
对，前面已经讲了。
Previously, we've already covered the teaching on the faults of receiving offering, and the faults can be found in distraction, in frivolous speech, and in indulging in oversleeping, as well as worldly chores. This time, we're not really learning this class in an extensive way, and the time that we spend on this teaching is rather not that long, but I really hope that you can study it again and again and review it again and again, otherwise you won't be able to remember. Especially for the beginner Bodhisattvas, I believe this is quite crucial for you to study it. For those of you who are wisdom action bodhisattvas that's sitting in our group of audience, you don't necessarily need to read it again. For those of you who don't want to review this text, I believe you must have already became wisdom action bodhisattvas. And for those of you who are wisdom action bodhisattvas and pretending to be beginner bodhisattvas, I truly rejoice, because it must be very difficult for you to pretend to be beginner bodhisattvas and sit with us and listen to this class. In terms of this teaching, in terms of the oral transmission, I have a pure oral transmission from Pontsog Rinpoche. Therefore, I really think that is quite crucial for me to give you this teaching directly. I hope this kind of special oral transmission can be passed down, and later I really hope that you can propagate this teaching. You can read and chant this yourself, and you can print pamphlets and books and give it to others. We are making lots of those audios as well. It is going to be made available to all of you as well. In fact, I do believe nowadays it's quite convenient, because there's this technology where you can play sutras on a really small gadget. I'm not sure what that's called, the Sutra player. In a very small gadget, you can include even thousands of classes. If you have one small USB like that, you can include many hundreds of the classes. This is a really great way of propagating the teachings. In this information era, if we were to engage in degeneration, it is fast and same as if we were to wanting to generate merit. Because of the existence of the Sutra player, this kind of small players that you can use, you don't necessarily have to get together with a group of people. You can actually listen to those teachings yourself. Later on, if you want to propagate the teachings, it will be the best for you to make those sutra players and give it to the others. I think this is such great skillful means. For example, if you were to have 20 classes, 10 classes that you want to listen to, you can keep them on your cell phone, your computer, and you can listen to that on your own. This is really great. Otherwise, I think if we were to only read the text without listening to the classes, without listening to the explanation of the sutra, it is not for certain that everyone would understand the content of the sutra. There are the ones, of course, who have lots of wisdom, maybe the worldly wisdom or worldly smarts. But with their worldly smarts, you can try to see if you can understand the content, the full content of the sutra. Anyhow, this sutra talks about something rather quite simple. It is about how a beginner bodhisattva should avoid and should practice. Anyhow, let us continue with our class. The Buddha told Maitreya Bodhisattva, saying that, Maitreya, I shall tell you so. If a bodhisattva does not practice, does not engage in practice, does not eradicate afflictions, nor practice in chanting and listening to the sutras, I would say that this person is not a true renunciate. This sutra is mainly focused to give to the monastics, but I think lots of the lay practitioners should listen to it as well. So now let's look at the teaching given to Maitreya Bodhisattva by the Buddha. He said that while there are bodhisattvas who do not practice and they do not want to eradicate the afflictions in their mind stream, they do not want to practice samadhi, shamatha, they do not chant sutras or anything that is full of blessings, they do not seek for the teachings, I would say that such kind of person is not a true renunciate. We should really reflect all of these upon ourselves and look around. There are places where we can see those monasteries and monastics. However, they do not practice, they do not chant, they do not listen to the Dharma. And for those kind of, the Buddha said that those kind of people are not true renunciates. We should all reflect upon ourselves. You've already chosen the path of getting ordained, and then you should think about what was your initial aspiration. And then you can think about what do you want to achieve after being ordained and how you want to spend the rest of your life. There are great people who have great aspirations, and they aim for supreme goal, supreme attainment, as well as benefiting sentient beings. Of course, that's for the ones with great capacity. And there are the ones who have medium capacity who would practice throughout their whole life, and there are the ones who are inferior, rather, who don't have such kind of diligence at all to practice. According to the Jakata Sutra, it says that there are the ones who practice in the inferior way, then they would reap the inferior fruition. The ones who practice in the medium capacity, they would reap the medium fruition, and the ones who practice the supreme, who engage in supreme practice, would reap the according fruition. So, depending on the different levels of diligence, the fruitions also have differences. As a monastic, you should also observe what are you doing every day. There are the ones who don't disturb the others, who don't squander their time, who don't get distracted. Rather, they would use their time to practice and chant every day or engage in meditation. And they're doing really well in managing their time as a practitioner. And there are the ones, not only they do not practice on their own, they would disturb the others, they would influence the others, and in such a way your time being spent here as a practitioner is rather meaningless. According to the Contemplation Sutra, it says that the Bodhisattvas made aspiration to liberate all sentient beings, to eradicate all afflictions, to steady all Dharma doors, to realize all Buddha fruitions. It is usually included in the Chinese Buddhism chanting books. In fact, I think we should think in such a way. You should make aspiration to study all the Dharma teachings. Though maybe some of you can be a little bit dull or a bit slow, but at least you should make such kind of aspiration to practice the Dharma for lifetimes. And this is really meaningful. This kind of aspiration is quite important. Same as the dedication of merit is also really important. When we chant the dedication of merit during the aspiration of Samadhavajra, you should really look at your own mind. Pure precepts, contemplation, studying, and practice, these are all really important for renunciates, for the monastics. Toga Rinpoche, he upholds two words in his practice centers. The first one is study, and second is uphold. Study is studying the Dharma, contemplation, and practice, and uphold is upholding or observe the precepts. So whomsoever want to stay in his center, those are the two requirements. If one person cannot fulfill those requirements, then he would not agree them to stay in his center. The great masters of the past, in fact, they have different regulations for their Dharma centers. We should really study from them, and we should contemplate on how to carry on that tradition. We should carry on the tradition of the previous masters and the lineage masters. This is really important. If you were to completely create something new out of your dualistic concept, it is not necessarily that you will be able to succeed. So whenever the Dharma teacher gives teachings, the Dharma teachers usually would quote from the Sutra, the Shastras, as well as the Guru's teaching. That means this Dharma teacher has infused with the teachings from the great venerable ones, with their blessings as well as wisdom. However, when we look around, there are the ones who make up teachings out of their dualistic thoughts, and they would blend the teaching with their dualistic thoughts as well as the worldly knowledge. Well, I'm not sure if that would be meaningful. It's hard to say that it would be beneficial either. So I think we should definitely pay attention to these areas, that is, how to carry on the lineage tradition. The Buddha then said, Maitreya, if there are bodhisattvas who practice diligently to study or gain wisdom through contemplation and study, as well as eradication of afflictions through practice. Wisdom and eradication is a specific term in Tibetan language. It refers to that. It refers to studying wisdom generated through studying contemplation, eradication of affliction through practice. So the practitioners who engage in studying contemplation and practice should not be like the worldly beings, should not have lots of afflictions and lots of sorrow and worries all day long. Shouldn't be like that at all. A true practitioner has to have the transmundane wisdom, as well as the wisdom generated from samadhi. If one were not to practice, if one were not to engage oneself in all kinds of worldly affairs, then the Buddha said that this is practicing on the noble teaching of the Tathagata. Buddhism, in fact, is wisdom. It is a teaching, a spirit a spiritual path. It is not focused on materialistic existence. That is, for example, the Buddha statue or the stupa or monasteries and temples and so on. It's not like that. The two eminent Chinese Buddhism masters, Master Jin Kong and Master Xingyun, I believe I've met both of them around when they're around 90 years old. They hold different opinions from each other. Master Jin Kong said that Master Xingyun often would build monasteries everywhere, but he doesn't give enough teaching, so his disciples would have a hard time to develop wisdom. But Master Xingyun would say that, well, Master Jin Kong doesn't even receive disciples and doesn't build any centers, and then he would leave nothing behind after his passing. In fact, I believe different teachers have different sacred meanings. Both of them have contributed greatly towards Buddhism. But the true Buddhism, indeed, is built on top of wisdom. This is quite important. So whenever you have a chance to start to take some of those centers or an empty temple, then it would be the best to give teachings. Otherwise, without the teachings and realization from the teachings, you're no other than a temple with a monk, a young monk or old monk staying in there. What's the purpose of that? You should definitely contemplate upon that. And then to continue, the Buddha said that if there are bodhisattvas who take delight in the worldly affairs, this is inappropriate. If there are bodhisattvas who affiliate oneself with worldly affairs all day long, that is abiding in the wheel of birth and death. So a bodhisattva shouldn't do that. If a bodhisattva or beginner bodhisattva who only engage in building stupas and temples and statues, which of course would consider to be as making lots of merit, but such kind of merit compared to the merit that will be generated by studying, contemplating, and practicing the Dharma, it is quite minimal. Therefore, the Buddha advised the material bodhisattva saying that such kind of worldly affairs, in fact, should not be conduced by the beginner bodhisattvas. And then the Buddha continued to say that if there are bodhisattvas who take delights in the worldly affairs and chores such as building a stupa that is made of the 7 jewels and taking the size that could permeate the 3,000-fold world, such kind of bodhisattva still cannot make me feel joyous. And this is not making offering and venerate me either. In fact, whenever we think about serving the Sangha or when we think of accumulating merit, we should really contemplate on what could generate such kind of merit or a great amount of merit. So over here, the Buddha said that definitely one who built the stupa that is as high, as big as the 3,000-fold world and is made of the 7 jewels, still cannot make him joyous. And the Buddha then continued to say that Maitreya, if there are bodhisattva who can study the Prajnaparamita, who can understand Prajnaparamita, even uphold the teaching of the 4 verses of such, chanting, reciting, and practice upon it, or to give teachings to the others of the Prajnaparamita, then this kind of person is making offering to me. We often would think that this is very meritorious. If I were to make statues, oh, you're making statues? I'll make statues. There are lots of senior lamas over here. They would say that, oh, I'm going to build a stupa here. I'm going to build another stupa stupa for Chömyi Rinpoche, for Gonchen Rinpoche, and start to talk about the stories of different stupas. In fact, as a monastic, in some senses, of course, building stupa and the statues, as well as printing Dharma books, those are very meritorious. But what really delights the Tathagata is to engage in studying, contemplation, and practice the Dharma, especially in areas of Prajnaparamita, in terms of to study emptiness, the teachings of emptiness. So let it be studying the Sutra of Prajnaparamita or the verses of Prajnaparamita, including chanting the Heart Sutra, or give others the teachings of Prajnaparamita. In fact, that kind of merit would be really great. What's the reason then? The Buddha then continued to say that because all the bodhi of the Buddhas are generated from listening and contemplation, and were not generated from engage in various affairs. I believe there's a sutra, it's called the Sutra of All Meritorious Virtues, Samadhi Sutra. It is quoted in the Kshitigarbha Sutra as well. There are about 3 volumes in it. It's not too long. Anyhow, it talks about how a bodhisattva would generate the most merit by listening, by engaging in extensive listening. There's a bodhisattva in that sutra asked the Buddha, saying that out of generosity and practicing observing precepts as well as listening extensively, which one out of 3 would be the most meritorious, would be the most dignified? And the Buddha then told him that, in fact, the most meritorious would be listening extensively. It is the most supreme and is most dignified. And he also, the Buddha taught in the sutra about many of the metaphors to describe the greatness of the merits that could be generated through extensive listening. According to Longchenpa, he said that the great ati, the Maha-ati, is realized through contemplation and study. Without such, it would be very difficult to realize the Maha-ati through simple abiding. According to Beacon of Certainty, also talks about if one has not generated certainty in the view, then one cannot eradicate all the vice dualistic thoughts. Without eradicating such kind of vice and inferior dualistic thoughts, then one cannot eradicate obscurations and so on. So I really think that listening to the Dharma in an extensive array would be really meritorious. So we should all cherish such opportunities that we still can listen to the Dharma. There were people who used to say that, well, all you need to do is just practicing abiding. All you need to do is just to get into retreat. All you need to do is just engage in serving the Sangha. You don't need to listen to classes. It's just increasing your dualistic thoughts. There are people who spread rumors like such. In fact, this is wrong, because it's not that the dualistic thoughts are, none of the dualistic thoughts are helpful. In fact, there are good dualistic thoughts and not good dualistic thoughts. Through the extensive listening and contemplation, you will be able to generate wisdom, and that is not necessarily dualistic thoughts, because they can help us to eradicate the it could help us to eradicate dualistic thoughts, so it could be a great antidote. Then the Buddha told Maitreya Bodhisattva, saying that if there are bodhisattvas who engage in worldly affairs, compared to the kinds of practitioners who engage in practice and chanting, we should know that such kind of person would grow more obstacles and will not gain any merits. Because the worldly affairs, compared to engaging in practice in chanting and speaking, we should know that the latter would have more merit. Because the kinds of worldly affairs that we engage in may seem to be meritorious, but they do not become the cause of enlightenment. Therefore, it doesn't carry the cause of becoming enlightened. The three kinds of meritorious deeds and all the kinds of practices that correspond to the three meritorious deeds, such as giving teachings and observe precepts and generosity, those are all the qualities that would arise from wisdom. Therefore, Buddha said that Maitreya Bodhisattva, the bodhisattvas who engage in worldly affairs, should not create any obstacles for the bodhisattvas who engage in speaking and listening to the Dharma. For example, just to put it in an easier metaphor, if we were to have three classes, one class is the class of the students who provide service to the Sangha. The second class is the class that focus solely on listening to the Dharma. And third one is the class where the practitioners would only engage in practice of the Dharma. So the first class should not obstruct the second, because listening and contemplation of the Dharma would surpass the ones who engage in serving the Sangha in terms of their merit, and the ones who engage in the practice would have more merits than the ones who only listen and contemplate the Dharma. So, according to the 10 Chakras Kshitigarbha Sutra, it says that if one were to eradicate afflictions, one has to practice meditation and not solely listening and chanting, because if one were to seek for nirvana, one has to practice meditation. So, for those of you who really want to seek Buddhahood, you have to practice in meditation. I really hope that you do not give that up. I'm not sure all the ones who's engaged in the practice class are under lots of pressure now. You really should, because without the pressure of listening and contemplation, you should engage all your time in practice. Otherwise, you won't be able to eradicate your afflictions. The ones who are in those practice classes, the actual practicing classes, you should use all your time and not squander your time. This is quite important. The other day I also mentioned that in the new year, in 2021, I hope that everyone should make this aspiration that you will take the time to plan your life, because human life is so rare and it's very difficult to obtain. You need to plan and think about how many practices you want to engage in, and how many mantras you want to chant, and how many tens of thousands of times you want to repeat those mantras, or how many sutras and shastras you want to study. If you want to serve the Sangha, then you should also make the aspiration thinking about what you want to do to serve the Sangha. I can't say that we have to plan for the next 3 Asamkhya kalpas, but at least we should plan our life for this year. If we were to still live for the next year, then what are we going to do? In fact, I plan for every month of the year at the beginning of the year so that I will be able to finish all my plans. And sometimes I run out of time, but in general, even if you have to tweak your plans a little bit, but if you were to have a plan, then at least you won't be too slacked off. I heard nowadays many of you started already to buy the agenda books and so on. And I think it's fine if you really want to get one. I feel that what's more important is that you have a plan and think about what you want to do for each and every day of your life. I think I told you the other day, some of the teachers really give very simple really write very simple journals. They would say that, oh, I went to release life in the morning, and then in the afternoon I met with 2 or 3 friends. Sometimes they would write, I had a meeting during the day and I give a class in the evening. It's very short, but of course you can write. Of course he has some longer ones, and it was very mesmerizing, really interesting to read. Anyhow, this is really a plan that you should persist throughout 365 days. It is not that you would say that I want to benefit sentient beings. I would never ever leave my teacher. Well, it would be the best for you to write down all of those and have a plan for your life, because when the wind of karma blows, it's very hard to say what you're going to do. So at least for the time being, you should write it down. Anyhow, over here it says that as a practitioners, we should not disrupt the others. We should not use a wood fish and start chanting loudly. This is really unnecessary if you are just on your own. What's the point of that? If you were to use a gigantic wood fish and start getting those rhythms, this is really not good, and people around you probably would think that you have some mental problems maybe. It's quite important to protect the minds of the others and protect the mind of your neighbors and whomsoever live around you, because we don't really have soundproof walls. But nowadays, people don't really think about the others. Or maybe they're trying to provide an opportunity for the others to practice patience. But if you were to obstruct with the others' practice and listening and contemplation in this way, this is really not good karma. You have to think about others' feelings. You have to be very considerate. So the ones who live in the dorm rooms and the residents, I encourage all of you to be more considerate. Over here, the Buddha said that the ones who engage in worldly affairs should not interfere with the practitioners who engage in listening and contemplation, and the ones who engage in listening and contemplation should not interfere with the ones who engage in practice. The Buddha then told Maitreya Bodhisattva, saying that all the Bodhisattvas whom engage in worldly affairs in the whole continent of Jambudvipa, at a place of the Bodhisattva whom engage in practice and giving teachings of the Dharma, they should relate to, make offering to, and serve such kind of Bodhisattva. If the Bodhisattvas whom engage in chanting and giving teachings at the place of bodhisattvas whom practice samadhi, they should relate to, make offering, and serve such bodhisattvas. For such kind of virtuous deeds, the Tathagata would also rejoice and praise. According to the Tibetan version, rejoice and praise by the Tathagatas also mean approved by the Tathagatas. For such kind of bodhisattvas who diligently practice in wisdom, one should make offering and serve such kind of bodhisattva. And then the merit that can be gathered is immeasurable. Why is that? It's because the wisdom is really the most supreme of all. So for all of the bodhisattvas over here who are practicing on emptiness, the ones who's practicing and studying prajna paramita, we should acknowledge that their merits are great. In fact, we should respect the Dharma because it is the most important. You can respect the people or not, but we should respect the Dharma that's in their mind stream. If we were to be very respectful to the Dharma, then we would naturally respect the people who's giving the Dharma, who's giving the teachings of the Dharma, because the Dharma comes from the Buddha. If we were to respect the Dharma, then we would naturally respect the Dharma textbooks, because such kind of Dharma comes from the Buddha as well. Nowadays, we would be very interested in the people. We would look at who's starring in certain movies, and if we are interested in a certain celebrity, we would be interested in that movie. But in terms of the Dharma, it is different. We should understand the relations between the Dharma and the people. We should understand it in such a way. Why is wisdom, the deed of wisdom, is the most supreme? Because let it be the mundane or super mundane wisdom. In fact, in all of the different deeds, it is the most supreme that could surpass the three realms. This wisdom, in fact, is the goal that we all seek. Let it be studying the Dharma, let it be going to prestigious universities and all of those. We are all seeking for wisdom. Lots of people are here for over 40 years, and their sole goal is to seek for wisdom. And it is very much worth it. Look at those people who just came here and compare them from then and now. Their mind stream are now filled with wisdom. They're completely different than how they used to be, and than the other people around. For example, about myself, I don't know how others are, but maybe because I give teachings and listen to the teachings, I think that compared to myself when I was much younger, I have learned some, maybe a little bit of wisdom in front of Ponsog Rinpoche and great masters like him. For such reason, I have far surpassed lots of my classmates from back then. I believe there's a teaching quoted from Mahaprajna Paramita Shastra where it says that out of all the great treasures, the treasure of wisdom is the most supreme. Out of all the sharp weapons, the knife or the sword of wisdom is the sharpest of all. Why does Manjushri Bodhisattva hold a sword? Many people would feel that, why does Manjushri hold a weapon? In fact, that is a symbol. That symbol symbolizes that with such kind of sword of wisdom that could eradicate all of our ignorance and wrong view. The various wrathful deities would hold all kinds of sharp weapons such as knives and daggers and so on and so forth. And the reason behind is not because they have great anger. It's not that they want to stab the foe. It's not like that at all. In fact, by the representation of such weapons, it could eradicate the dark web of ignorance in our mind stream. So we should really practice with great diligence so that wisdom could arise in our mind stream. Lots of people, after they arrive here, on one hand, they would engage in various kinds of practices to train themselves. I noticed that yesterday, some of those fellow practitioners who serve the Sangha, they were carrying heavy boxes out of the large trucks into shops. It really must have been very tiring, and to serve the Sangha, it was a great way of practicing confession. We talked about the different faults of taking delights in oversleeping. I believe the Dharma practitioners, our fellow practitioners who were serving the Sangha by carrying those boxes last night, they wouldn't oversleep at all. I think by participating in serving the Sangha definitely would generate lots of great merit as well, because lots of great masters from the past, they would first engage in serving the Sangha at the beginning of their monastic life in order to confess. So it's quite important still. On one hand, it's very important to do all of those. On the other, it's not that we just need to stay here and serve the Sangha and eat and as long as we're warm, as long as we're not hungry, that's enough. It's not like that at all. In fact, everyone should still, based on your own condition, to practice and seek wisdom. This is the best place, in fact, to seek for the knowledge and to develop wisdom. Lots of great masters nowadays, in fact, I've been telling everybody since a while ago, I think that the mind stream of those of you who've stayed here for a long time are getting more gentle, and your mind stream is more malleable. In fact, Ponzo Rinpoche once said that I can stay here for only maybe 7 or 8 years. And it's not that I need different disciples to be here. It is that if you want to stay here, most of the time, all of you want to stay here is because that we have the best Khenpos and Khenmos in the world, and may their wisdom and compassion be passed on to you. Do you like my clothing today? Better? My collar was too high yesterday, so I felt a little bit weird. So let's continue. Okay, we haven't really got into the actual teaching yet, so let's move on. Now the actual class. At that time, Maitreya Bodhisattva addressed the Buddha, saying that world-honored one, Tathagata talks about the beginner bodhisattvas. So Maitreya Bodhisattva saying that, well, since you've already taught us the beginner bodhisattvas about the faults of taking delights in destruction, in frivolous speech, in oversleeping, and in worldly affairs. So, world-honored one, could you talk more on the faults of engaging in conceptual elaborations? What is it without conceptual elaborations? How could bodhisattvas then abide in this kind of practice environment without conceptual elaborations? So, conceptual elaborations, we can refer back to the quote from Madhyamika Karika, where it says that I prostrate to the perfect Buddha, the best of teachers, who taught that whatever is dependently arisen is unceasing, unborn, unannihilated, not permanent, not coming, not going, without distinction, without identity, and free from conceptual construction. So the kind of free from elaboration, free from the four extremes, the teaching from the Buddha that talks about the causes and conditions, the seizing of all the conceptual elaborations. Over here, the elaborations include ceasing, born, annihilated, permanent, coming and going, all of those. So if one were to eradicate all of those kinds of graspings, all of those permanent and annihilate and one and other, all of this kind of extremes, then this is called departing from all the conceptual elaborations. From the worldly sense, the conceptual elaborations refers to the ones who enjoy to engage oneself in quarrels, in arguments. If Bodhisattvas were to grasp onto such kind of conceptual elaborations, there are 20 faults as well. The later part of this sutra, we can see that it really leads us into the insights or teaching of Madhyamika. And then we will be able to be reborn into the Pure Land. So that would be the ending of this sutra. It is connected in such a way. There are different explanations on elaboration, on conceptual elaboration. Some of the conceptual elaborations refers to hearing and seeing and all of those, and some would consider the non-truth are conceptual elaborations. And over here, in fact, it refers to all of our dualistic thoughts. They can all be referred to as conceptual elaborations. So over here, Maitreya Bodhisattva asks, what are the faults of conceptual elaborations? Buddha then told Maitreya Bodhisattva, saying that the beginner bodhisattvas should be aware that the faults that could be brought by the conceptual elaborations are immeasurable. But over here, I am going to briefly to teach you 20 out of those. The first one is that one would generate many sufferings, many afflictions. I think we are quite aware of it, isn't it? If we were to have lots of grasping, let it be something or some people, as long as we grasp onto any of those, as long as we have such kind of conceptual elaborations, even if it's as small as a little sesame, the suffering that it brought with it would be as big as Mount Sumeru. The second fault is that it would increase one's anger and make one regress in his practice of patience. If one were to have lots of conceptual elaborations, then that person would definitely separate self and other, to have a sense of self and other. Whenever the other party doesn't make the self happy, this person would definitely generate lots of aggression. So such kind of aggression would then lead to the regression in the retrogress of patience. The monastics whomsoever generate anger cannot even be mediated by the Buddha. There was once a story that the two monastics had conflicts with each other. They pointed to each other and blamed each other for having aggression. And then the Buddha had to come to them and mediate the whole situation. But the two monastics warned the Buddha, saying that it would be the best for you to keep quiet. So the Buddha then couldn't really do much, and he had to leave that situation. I think nowadays there are lots of conflicts that we just really can't work through. This morning, I had to work with the construction team to mediate between the construction team and our fellow practitioners. They had lots of conflicts, and our fellow practitioner was saying that the construction team didn't do a good job, therefore they should not be paid, and the construction team was really angry. They said that if they were not getting paid, they would sue us. So I had to mediate the whole situation. Well, I was thinking about that during the Buddha's time, the monastics did not listen to the Buddha's teachings. So it is just very understandable that nowadays people would not listen to me. Many sutras give teachings like such. Ponzo Rinpoche also gave teachings on that before. He said that the conflicts that we have nowadays in the degenerated age are getting harder and harder to mediate. It's harder to get a harmonious situation. So it's just normal. Look at when the Buddha was still alive. Someone who is as great as the Buddha has such great merit cannot even mediate. Then it is only natural that we can handle lots of the situations now. I just also remember that Ponzo Rinpoche, when he was alive, he once asked certain Khenpo to give teaching on Abhidharma, but the Khenpo didn't want to. And Ponzo Rinpoche appeared to be very upset about that. And he said that if you don't want to give teaching anymore, it's your own responsibility. I'm leaving. And then the Khenpo later on regretted his response to Ponzo Rinpoche, and he requested for his forgiveness, and he did. So I think it's just normal nowadays that people get into lots of different conflicts, let it be monastics or lay practitioners. I think it's just very normal. As long as we have grasping, as long as there are conceptual elaborations, it is going to increase one's anger, and that would cause the retrogress of patience. That would definitely happen. This is the second fault. And the third fault would be that as long as you have such kind of grasping towards conceptual elaboration, then all the foes would bring you many suffering and harm, because they would have such kind of opportunity. As long as you grasp onto certain things, it gives your opponents opportunities to attack you. The ones who have great sense of competitiveness, you would feel that you are afraid of loss. But if you are not afraid of loss, or you're not competitive at all, then you are faultless and you cannot be defeated. Mahaprajnaparamita Shastra said that the winner would fall into the quagmire of arrogance. The loser would fall into the prison of worry. Therefore, the wise ones would not follow either of the two. This is so very well said, because they're the ones who really want to win, and they would definitely fall into a sense of arrogance, and vice versa. If you were to just say that, okay, I'll listen to you, it happens whichever way, as long as you're happy, then you would become more tender and you won't get into conflicts with anyone at all. If you were to have lots of grasping onto any of those elaborations, then you would be easily to argue with others. The fourth one is that it would delight the maras and the entourage of the Maras, because they would have the opportunities. According to the Sui and Tibetan translation, it says that it would delight the Mara, also delight the entourage of the Maras, as well as the retinues of the Maras. So they are separated. Instead, over here, it is in one sentence. The Sui dynasty translation actually doesn't have this part. Anyhow, over here it says that if we were to grasp onto conceptual elaborations such as quarreling and conflicts and in harmony, as well as obstacles at that time, because of such kind of inharmony happens in the Sangha, the inharmony between the Guru and disciples, the Maras would be very happy. According to the ornament of clear light, it says that there are the 46 types of Mara deeds, out of which the majority of those are the inharmony of Guru and disciples. The fifth is that one would not be able to generate any of those virtuous roots if it's not generated. The sixth one says that even if the ones who've already developed a little bit of virtuous deeds would slowly regress, they're the ones who at first have some faith as well as a compassion. Especially, I think faith is really important, without which you won't be able to practice. You won't be able to tread the path anymore. So the kind of faith towards the Guru, the Bodhisattvas and the Buddhas, especially your deities, and knowing that the non-duality of the deity and the Guru, if you are not careful with those, if you were to engage in the conceptual elaborations, then you will lose those kinds of insights as well as faith. You will end up being a scholar, a worldly scholar, just like the philosophers or anthropologists in our world. They would study the rights and the wrongs, and they would study the theories. But you won't be able to truly taste the flavor of Buddha Dharma, because such kind of flavor of great compassion, of bodhicitta, can only be tasted if you were to have genuine faith towards the teacher, towards the three jewels. If you were to completely rely upon your logic or your memory to study, then the kind of understanding will be very different. So to study Dharma and to study the worldly knowledge is indeed very different. When I was giving teaching of the verses on the Shastra of 400 verses, I remember that we had a fellow practitioner, a female practitioner actually, who was excellent in her study. And she wrote, and she usually would rank number 1 or number 2 in exams. But later on, she generated doubts and her faith was destroyed. She generated lots of wrong views and wrote many articles to criticize Nagarjuna. And I said that it would be extremely funny for someone of you to criticize Bodhisattva such like Nagarjuna. Your wisdom is not up to par to Nagarjuna at all. Therefore, I really hope that for those of you, when you are studying, it's quite important to generate faith and not to encourage any of those conceptual elaborations. Otherwise, you would lose your faith and you would generate doubts and wrong views. That would be quite pitiful. Now, the next one says that one would generate competitiveness. People would generate great grasping, which would result into competitiveness and fights, lots of competing. According to the Parinirvana Sutra, it says that the Buddha said the the worldly beings would be competitive with me, but I would not compete with the worldly ideas, because the worldly beings would say yes, I would comply and say yes. If the worldly beings would say no, I would also comply and say no. As the Buddha knows that the wisdom of the worldly beings are very limited, but the Buddha would comply with their limited wisdom. In fact, I think this kind of complying with the others is quite important. It is said in a sutra where it included a stanza that is very similar to a Zen master's koan, or a Zen master's poem, actually. The perfectly round moon would eventually wane. Also, the beautiful flowers would eventually wither. The people and the world is exactly like that as well. It is impermanent and it cannot fail such kind of rules of the world. Therefore, what's the point of fighting for winning and losing? What's the point of competing? So just like the round moon that would wane, as well as the beautiful flowers that would eventually wither, we cannot run away from such kind of rule of changing. Therefore, what's the point of fighting over? What's the point of competing with one another? In fact, I read this from a sutra. The sutra was taught in the form of gathas. I believe it was the translator whose name is Tian Shizai. After reading, I indeed felt that the quarrels and the competitiveness, the conflicts, are really ignorant. Because if we were to fight over something in this generation, and then our next generation or generations after generation, when they look at this kind of war or fights or conflicts, they would feel that this was very ignorant. Look at the relation between Japan and the United States. How rare. Anyhow, I don't want to get sidetracked, otherwise I won't be able to finish. Otherwise, I would be very good at talking about history. It was during the time, at that time, the wealth and the money that was saved in the American banks by the Japanese officials were frozen, and then the island in Hawaii and Japan, and then the military actions, and then how the United States threw an atom bomb. All of those stories. In fact, many people in our world, I believe we can get along harmoniously with one another, and we can share the resources that's provided by this world, by this earth. I really think that if the next generation of human beings can reorder the resources, each family and each village and each person should be able to use and share the resources that's available. And in this way, each family, each country, and each human being would be able to enjoy this world. But because people do not have a bodhicitta, and because people are very selfish, very self-centered, this whole world suffers gravely. Look at the pandemic this year. The cooperation between countries were not good, and the resources were not shared. We often talk about suffering of suffering. When one suffering has not ended, another suffering started adding on again and again. Look at the things that's happening in this world. It is definitely suffering of suffering. I really hope that the poor sentient beings would understand the teachings of Mahayana Buddhism, that would would definitely relax people, would definitely bring more happiness. But maybe because of the karma of the sentient beings, it might be not so possible right now. Now, the eighth one says that one would create the negative karma of being reborn in hell realm. The ninth one is that one would reap the unvirtuous affiliation of being born in unpleasant appearances. If a person often throw a tantrum and would be angry at all times, this person would turn out to be unpleasant to look at, and for that reason they would carry on this kind of habitual patterns into their lifetimes. The 10th one is that the person would not have a gentle tongue, would not be able to speak with fluency. The 11th is that the person cannot remember the teachings. Whatever long the oral transmission or the teachings that they received, they would not be able to remember it. Right after hearing those teachings, they would forget it right away. The 12th one is that they would not be able to understand the teachings that we have not heard. For example, people nowadays, they would feel very drowsy when they attend Dharma classes, and they would check their watch all the time. Why hasn't it ended? Some people might wonder. For that kind of people, it is really that they have not tasted the flavor of the Dharma yet. For the kind of true Dharma practitioners, when they have the chance to listen to the teachings they've never heard before, they would feel very joyous. They would feel that this is really wonderful, and they would cherish such kind of opportunities. Then the 13th one says that such kind of person would part from the virtuous friends or the virtuous spiritual teachers. There are students that's not welcomed by the good teachers. According to Mipa Rinpoche, he said that the good people. How did it go? He taught something in the teachings given to the king, remember? He said that to distinguish a person is bad or good is based on their actions. The good person is good is not because he has a lotus flower hanging from his head. And the bad person is considered as bad is because they're not welcomed. The 15th, one would not be able to generate renunciation on the path. It's very difficult for them to generate renunciation or any insights from the Dharma practice. 16th is that they would often run into speech or things that they do not take delight in. They would constantly hear the things that they are not happy with and see things that they're not happy to see. So their mind is constantly unhappy. For people who have better insights or good experiences or good Dharma practice, they would feel happy about everything. This is good, that is good, and everything's great. In fact, our practice and our karma is very different. There are people who don't even need any external stimuli, and they would feel lots of suffering. And there are people who facing those situations that's difficult to endure, such as being beaten up or being threatened of murder. They can face all of those obstacles without any problem. So the 17th, one would generate various kinds of doubt. Wherever this kind of person is born, they would generate lots of doubts, not only to the Dharma, but doubts towards people, towards the various things that happens to such kind of person. Even when it's time to wear clothing, they would generate doubts as well. Just like the celebrities, they are very anxious about choosing clothing, choosing their outfits. They would feel that this is not good and the other one's not good either. Now, the 18th is that they would be born in difficult areas, the unfavorable locations, and not be able to listen to the correct Dharma. So the 8 unfavorable environments, they won't have enough time to listen to the Dharma. The 19th is that they would encounter lots of obstacles when it's time to practice the virtuous Dharma. Whenever it's their time to practice virtuous Dharma, they would encounter various obstacles, such as the mouse would run into your room, and then the weather is getting bad, and the body, the mood, the diet, the appetite, all kinds of obstacles would all crush in together. According to Pachur Rinpoche, he said that the high dharmas, high practices, the old monk do not know how to practice, and the small practices, the old monk do not want to practice. So at the time of death, the old monk do not know how to practice anything. There are the people who want to practice virtuous Dharma, but when it's time to do so, they encounter various kinds of obstacles. I've studied with Pontsokro Rinpoche for 19 years. I've stayed with him for 19 years, and throughout the whole process, I felt very lucky because I've never generated any wrong view towards Pontsokro Rinpoche, nor have I created any unhappy events. So throughout my whole practice, I've never really felt lots of great obstacles. I didn't really want to leave when my health was not good, or I didn't want to leave because of my mood or my interpersonal relationship or anything. So I feel that in terms of practicing the virtuous Dharma, I didn't really encounter lots of obstacles. It's rather quite smooth. But of course, now let it be giving teachings or all kinds of things, there are some obstacles, but this is really normal because after the Guru passing into parinirvana, the Guru that is like the sun passing into parinirvana, we're left alone in this dark age, in this dark world. We have to rely upon our own power to practice, and that would definitely bring that would definitely throughout the whole process we would run into various kinds of obstacles, and this is really normal. So throughout of which we need to pray and supplicate to the Dharma practitioner so that may it be auspicious. As Mahayana practitioners, we should view everything as the blessings from the Buddha, from the Guru, not only for the good things that, oh, you eat well today or the weather is good today, those are the blessings, but you should consider that, oh, if I got bitten by a dog today, that must be the blessing from the Guru. I felt today, it must be the blessings from the Guru. Those are all the blessings of the Guru. So that's how we should view obstacles. And if we were to view it this way, then it would be, will no longer be obstacles anymore. It would become the blessings. The 20th is that one would attract many jealousy. This was not included, jealousy, this was not included in the Tibetan version, but the Sui dynasty doesn't have this one. I didn't really have time to compare the Sui dynasty translation because I have lots of worldly affairs and elaborations I have to take care of, so I didn't really have time to compare the Sui dynasty translation. Whenever you have time, it would be the best for you to do that. And then the Buddha continued with the gathas, so let me quickly finish this part. Hopefully I can finish it within 1 hour. Well, not going to be 1 hour, I was joking. And then the Buddha started to speak in verses, saying that such kind of bodhisattva would be vexed from worry and afflictions. They would depart from their forbearance because of anger. They would generate their foes would make one to generate harm. These are the faults of having conceptual elaborations. Delight the Maras and the entourage of the Maras. One would lose the virtuous dharma. These are the faults of grasp onto conceptual elaborations. The virtue that's not born won't be born. One would often be entangled in various kinds of conflicts. Also, one would create the karma of being reborn in lower realms. These are the faults of conceptual elaboration. According to the Sui dynasty translation and the Tibetan translation, this is a little different. But the different additions should not be viewed as false, because the different panditas would have different versions. The panditas from India, from the west, from the south, the different panditas who have the memory dharani, in fact, the wordings may be different, but the content would be the same. There are different editions in various sutras, as well as the worldly literature as well. Let it be the Kshitigarbha Sutra or the Dreams of the Red Chamber, the different Chinese classical literatures, and so on and so forth. Because of the different records, the different editions, they're a little bit different. So let's not regard them as a true or false edition. They're just different editions. Anyhow, the next one says that one would have unpleasant physique, would be reborn in inferior families. Their speech would be mumbling, such as this, that nobody could understand. These kinds of language and all those kind of results are the results of grasping onto conceptual elaboration. Unable to uphold the Dharma or not hearing the Dharma at all, one would be isolated from the virtuous friends. Those are the faults of conceptual elaboration. One would rather relate to Vaishya's spiritual friend. One would renounce from the Dharma and not be able to hear the pleasant language. Those are the faults of conceptual elaborations. There are some of our fellow practitioners who complain to me that they heard only the scoldings of the Dharma teachers. They would feel that the Dharma teachers were scolding them all day long, so they have to change different classes. I know this I know this female practitioner who at first went to one class and then she felt that that Dharma teacher was always scolding her in class every day. So she said that she has to change class. I agreed. She changed and then she felt that the second teacher also, she felt that it was scolding her. And then she asked me to change again. And then later she asked me, why is everyone scolding me? I said, well, maybe they have some secret meanings. And then the next one says that one would constantly generate doubt and not be able to understand the Dharma. One would be reborn in the unfavorable conditions without any time to practice the Dharma, not having any benefits, would have all kinds of obstacles in terms whenever it's time to practice the virtuous Dharma. Their right mindfulness would be worsened. They would rather have lots of jealousy and harm from the foes. Those are the faults for conceptual elaboration. Those kinds of faults are the results of conceptual elaboration. So after knowing these, you should be quite afraid of conceptual elaboration. You would feel that, well, this is definitely the faults of grasping. In fact, if you're not grasping onto anything, you would be happy at all times. Look at the wind and the flowers and everything in this world. If we don't grasp onto anything, in fact, the world is quite pleasant. A few days ago, I was unhappy as well, and that is really quite normal for everyone. But for the wise ones, you should learn how to depart from these kinds of conceptual elaborations very swiftly. And the way of doing so is to study Madhyamika, to see the nature of the mind. At that time, once you can practice in such a way, you would feel that how foolish I was. Why did I grasp onto conceptual elaborations like that? It would be difficult to attain the great Bodhi. So such kind of person, the kind of wise ones should not relate oneself who have lots of conflicts and conceptual elaborations which would lead to afflictions. The wise ones should part from such kind of person for hundreds of yujanas and not even close to that kind of person at all. In fact, there's really nothing to grasp onto. Let it be money, be a person or a house. From its nature, they're all empty. They do not belong to us. Even our body, it doesn't belong to us. Look at cancer. There are some incurable diseases, but before that, you would feel that this is my body. I would grasp onto it. But if we were to grasp onto any of those, even if it's as big as a little sesame seed, it could cause great suffering. But if the wise ones, if you do not grasp onto those, you still have a chance to live a happy life. So over here, we'll stop for today. I think we have only one class left.
Chubum tsunen rowa